pointillism, right? Sunday afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte. If you took an art history class, you certainly saw this painting. This giant picture of an afternoon on an island where people are picnicking and recreating, made up of teeny tiny dots, the whole thing. And as you approach the painting, it becomes increasingly extraordinary to realize that this entire scene is made up of like dots the size of pinpoints. Crazy. And yet, there it is, this beautiful painting with an understandable and recognizable scene of people just enjoying being outside together. So put that picture in your mind behind me somewhere. We're going to think about that for a second. I was thinking about it a lot this week as I was reading our Torah portion, Bamidbar, which is the beginning of the book of Numbers, which in Hebrew is Bamidbar and means in the desert. Actually, it's mistranslated as Numbers. I'll tell you why in just a second if you haven't read the Torah portion yet this week. But here we find ourselves in the desert. And the very first thing that happens in the entire Torah portion of Bamidbar, the first Torah portion of the book of Numbers, is a census that's taken of the Jewish people. Hence the mistranslation Numbers. The entire book gets named basically after this counting, even though it's really about 38, I think, years of wandering. So Bamidbar, the desert, in the desert, is not just about the census, but the census was so important, actually, that the whole book gets named for it. And I've never noticed before, I don't know if any of you have, but I had never taken note of the fact that this census is read during the counting of the Omer. Okay, now that I've noticed this, it seems kind of obvious. We count the Omer from Pesach to Shavuot, 50 days that take us from the freedom of going out from Egypt, from Passover, to Shavuot, the giving of the 10 Commandments and the Torah, under Half Dome in Yosemite, perhaps. So, of course, this Torah portion would always fall during that time because we always read this Torah portion right around now. But it never struck me before. The story of the census is the story of individual counting of all of the people that make up our community, or that made up our community then, and the tremendous significance of each and every person who was part of the community. Hence the details in this Torah portion about who's related to whom and why and whose tribe and all of that, because each and every person matters. And just like in a pointillist painting, every single dot is someone. When these dots come together, you get this extraordinary landscape, this community, this painting of something much, much larger than each dot, and in fact, impossible almost to imagine that it's made up just of tiny dots, but it is. The counting of the Omer is sort of similar in a way. We count each day, not because each day is incredibly significant, or each moment of each hour of each day is incredibly significant, but rather because of the insignificance of so many moments. Each of the moments in our lives, only a few are incredibly momentous. Most are just important in that we're alive and we're living them. And the Omer reminds us that each of the days that we count during this 50-day time is a model for what we do the rest of the year. Counting days, counting actions, very tiny ones that add up to something, from freedom to the giving of the Torah. Such an important time period, such an important part of our own development, but not in unto themselves necessarily important days, beyond our necessity to acknowledge and appreciate them and to count them. So I was thinking about these two things working together, the census and the Omer counting, as these incredible messages, or an incredible message that comes to us within Judaism. The same message, really, that each tiny dot contributes to a giant masterpiece. We know exactly who each person is. Each person adds up ultimately to a community. And we know that each tiny action we take adds up to a person, to a life, that then becomes part of a community. When combined, we go from counting bodies or numbers to counting souls, to counting not just the people that are part of our community or who exist, but rather who are made up of their own actions and their own way of being in the world. We go from a counting of quantity, in a way, to quality. We become a people of choices. We become a people of individual encounters. And that combination animated us at the time when we were Bamidbar, in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. The aspirational message of this part of the Torah was that if we kept going forward, we might become a people, and we might get to a land. We might be able to plant vineyards, and we might be somewhere in a significant way. But imagine how our ancestors felt only 2 years into the wandering in the desert, 38 to go. And all of this was just aspirational. They had to believe that each of the people, and ultimately each of our actions, would matter. We come together tonight, and every time we come together as a minyan, a community made up of individuals. And in this room, I know that so many of us come from so many different places. Our hearts and our contributions, our kavanot, when we come together, are so different. Tonight, we have people who are here grieving. We have people who are here worried. We have people who are here celebrating. We have people who are here just because it happens to be Shabbat. And each of us will find ourselves in that place, in all of those places at some time. And that is really the message of the counting of the Omer, that each day that we live not only is something to be grateful for, but that we find ourselves throughout our lives in every kind of different moment. That every one of those moments contributes to the full life that we will live, and that each of our lives, as we come together, creates this minyan and a larger community and the people of Israel and people of the world. Just like George Seurat's painting, those individual dots add up to something really quite beautiful and quite meaningful, though each one individually is hard to recognize. So, wanted to share with you a poem, Mary Oliver's poem that is most definitely my favorite. Poem entitled The Summer Day. I'm sure many of you know this poem. She asks in this poem all of these questions, the questions of who we are, the questions of how we spend our time, and the questions of the Omer, without actually asking anything Jewish, but rather giving us these questions to contemplate in our own way as we decide how to spend our days, how to spend our hours, and how to build community. She wrote, "Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, to stroll in the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last, and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Shabbat Shalom.